to anybody and help anybody through the journey of navigating being on a feeding tube. So we are here from you. And on that note, I would like to introduce Kelly. Kelly is a nutritionist as well as an employee of Cambrooke, and she's going to share a lot of great information with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. Yes, I work for Cambrooke, and I was previously a pediatric GI dietitian here in Charleston, South Carolina. And then also my son was diagnosed with EOE at 11 months old. And I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of background of what we went through. And he relies on amino acid based formula to support his nutrition intake. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Feel free whenever I'm going to kind of do some interactive questions. If you want to either enter it in the chat, or you're more than welcome to turn on your camera and answer it like that. And also you can leave some Q&A type questions throughout the meeting, and Ellen and Shay are going to keep an eye on those as well. And then the slides recording is going to be available. So overall, we're going to go through my family's experience with EOE, a brief educational session on these potential nutrient gaps that can occur with elimination diets and EOE, and then overall with the diagnosis, and even when you're not following an elimination diet, how these feeding difficulties can contribute to these nutrient gaps as well. And then a brief overview of EquiCare Junior and Essential Care Junior, and then really looking at a closer look at the diet and seeing where those deficiencies are and how these formulas can help fill those nutrient gaps. And then we'll have time for some question and answers. My only disclosure is that I am employed by Ajinomoto Cambrooke. So this is our EOE journey. So tried to breastfeed, bottles, breast milk, and really was having, as a first-time mom, I didn't know if it was spit up, vomiting, I don't know, it seems like a lot. So reflux, eczema, all those allergic kind of symptoms, but he was thriving, 90th percentile. Tried eliminating cow's milk for a month and it didn't work. At the time, Zantac was allowed, and that did not work as well. And then really things kind of took a change as my breast milk supply dropped when I went back to work. And then he just gradually started taking less and less of his volume as I introduced a cow's milk protein infant formula. He did like solids, but they were mostly the puffs, pouches. And as a dietitian mom, I was trying to introduce eggs into his diet because I was trying to keep him from getting an IgE allergy to eggs. And he ate that every morning. So he started to have worsening reflux symptoms, took him into the GI clinic where I was working, and they prescribed him on a high dose PPI, was having constipation as well. And then the feeding difficulties really just kind of exacerbated from there. He started to take less and less. And at 9 months, he was admitted to the hospital for dehydration just from not taking anything at all. He was then changed to an amino acid formula, but really we were only restricting dairy, soy, and really wheat in his diet at that time. And although he still looked healthy to everyone else that saw him, to me, he looked little because I had seen him at 90th percentile and then saw him drop to 75th and then at 9 months to 50th. So to me, it was more scary, right? Because you know your child, you know that's not what they normally look like. And so a lot of times it's hard to get people to take you seriously when your kid looks healthy, but you know that they're vomiting every single night after they eat, and really just going through those challenges as well. And so then he started taking a little bit more of the amino acid formula, infant amino acid formula, And really solids were the only way to get through. He was just having such a hard time with the formula. He would just gag. And finally, we took him to ENT and they said, you know what? His adenoids are blocking 75% of his upper airway. He did a speech eval, no aspiration. And, deep down, I knew. I saw EOE, children with EOE all the time in my clinic. I educated on this all the time. So deep down, I knew that it was a possibility, but I was just hoping it was just really bad reflux. So he ended up getting an endoscopy at 11 months old when he got his adenoids taken out. And he had greater than 50 eosinophils per high-powered field in his esophagus. At the time of his scope, he had removed milk, soy, and wheat for 12 weeks, and he was on a high-dose PPI. And at that allergy visit, he did a skin prick test and was positive to egg. And that was the only one he tested to on his skin prick test. But because I knew really his main diet was egg, because we had already removed everything else, it was very obvious, kind of crazy. I like to tell this story. When I left the allergy appointment, I was behind a car at a red light. And I promise you, on the back of the car, the license plate, it said egg. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So we ended up removing egg in addition to the milk, the wheat, and the soy, and had a repeat endoscopy at 12 weeks. And he had no eosinophils present in his biopsies. And then we were eventually able to wean him off of the PPI. But, even though I had all these resources, right? Like, I'm a pediatric GI dietitian. I should know these things. When it's your child, it's like everything goes out the door, right? It's like you don't know what to do all of a sudden. And so we didn't have insurance. I live in South Carolina. We didn't have any insurance coverage for amino acid formula, and it was costly. Adjusting to getting him to actually take amino acid formula was such a challenge, especially after being on breast milk and that standard infant formula. Understanding the difference between what's a GI bug that's normal for a toddler and is this an EOE flare? All the time, I called one of the doctors that I worked with in GI, and I'd be like, he's vomiting again. I don't know. Is it a GI bug? And then an hour later, he'd have a fever, and I'm like, okay, that was just a GI bug. And really, even though I probably was thinking in overdrive about trying to keep variety in the diet, like deep down, I knew there were all these nutritional gaps, removing these big food groups. The extra time you had to spend on meal prep and snack prep, the increased cost of these specialty food items, coordination of care with daycare, and getting them to understand that what this is and why we have to have specialty foods, and it's not okay to give him certain things. The birthday parties, the pre-planning, the baseball games, vacation, school. So these are all the challenges that I deal with, and I know a lot of you deal with. But is there anything, separate from here? I'd love to hear if there's anything else that you guys feel are challenges that you've been dealing with.
You're free just to unmute yourself and speak. You don't have to raise your hand or put it in chat. We're just kind of having an open discussion.
Yeah, you don't even have to put your face on the screen. You can just talk.
Hi, Stephanie Klutenberg here. I got my daughter Ruth. She's our little EOE girl.
Hi.
She's very shy. But so she was diagnosed about 20 months old, where she was second percentile for weight. She got up to 14th, and now she's back down to 4th. Well, thank you, sweetie. But so now she is on budesonide, and we thought she came around to milk, so we thought we'd try it since her doctor was convinced that, hey, she's on budesonide, it'll cover any EOE reaction. Well, not the case. She's been fighting a flare-up for the last month and borderline food strike, of course. And not coming back around and daily complaining that it's tight. It tight up here.
Oh.
And so it's a battle of trying to figure out how on earth to get this girl feeling more comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And the challenge when they're that little of like understanding before it's too late, right? Like you're doing
Yeah.
this intervention and it's that communication is so difficult because they can't explain it yet, right? They can't
Yeah, she
explain.
just understands pain. So, yeah.
Right, right. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
she's 3 now, so she's dealt with it for a while, a little bit.
Oh, well, I hope you guys can find some answers through your providers, and hopefully today I can provide some answers to some things as well.
Hopefully, it's just been, yeah, a long stressor, so. And I'm
Yeah.
postpartum too, so, because I
Oh
got our
goodness.
second one here
Oh
laying,
goodness.
napping.
Oh goodness.
And just remember, we all have doctors that are GIs and work with doctors, and some are EOE specialists and some are not. So bringing up to your doctor that you were in a meeting like this, and would it be possible, does he think it would be helpful to do a supplement, a formula supplement, especially if she's only in the 4th percentile and might not be thriving normally? Just because they're a doctor doesn't mean they always, think of everything or have the answer. So as a patient and being your own child's advocate, it wouldn't be a bad thing to say, do you think it would be helpful for my child to maybe supplement? You don't have to remove all food and do this, but you can
Right.
supplement with formula also. And it would, maybe just give some extra nutrients that aren't there.
And I actually just went ahead and started getting protein powder just to mix in with her rice milk, and just to kind of help boost it once in a while. And so, I mean, there's some of that I've done, and they've tried pushing Neocate and Kate Farm, super expensive and can't afford it, of course. And last time we tried it, she would actually sneak off and go throw it up, which is what she would take before that. And so, yeah.
Somebody asked in the chat, Kelly, and they said,
Yeah,
worrying about leaving food out long-term might create intolerance or future allergy of concerned growth or body and brain with several foods removed. I guess they're working with a dietitian not really talking much about macro nutrients.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's one of the biggest things is this fear of, okay, well, I'm taking this out, but then I risk having a future reaction when it's removed after being sensitized to it, right? So we definitely also dealt with that too. And that's one of the reasons why we most recently did an egg oral food challenge, just to make sure that if there's an accidental exposure, because it's been out of his diet since he was 11 months old. He's now about to be 6 years old in a couple weeks. So I completely understand with that fear of, okay, we take this out. But so I think that's why it's always so important, yes, to remove them, but also to challenge these foods. And we waited so long because, like Stephanie said, like there's so little and you can't communicate. So when we would challenge it, it was like, we wouldn't know until a month later that was bothering him the whole time. Right. And so you just hate that you can't communicate with them at that time. So that's definitely a challenge. But he did continue on the 4-food elimination diet. And then he's drinking 16 ounces of Essential Care Junior, which we'll talk about today, the formula that we make here at Ajinomoto Cambrooke. And his growth now is 70th percentile, his BMI is 60th. And he passed his oral food challenge. And now the plan is to trial baked eggs so we can like you said, reintroduce this, have it in his diet, and allow for some more variety and more options and more protein sources. And we'll also talk about the protein impact as well, and then rescope. So before we move on, is there anything else that you guys had a question about any of the things we've discussed so far? Okay. So really, how do these present normally? So you'll see here that in this study from 2004, now granted this was a while ago, things may be a little bit different now, but overall we see in these different age groups that that people present a little bit differently. So in the younger age groups, it was more that feeding disorder because they were avoiding food or avoiding these certain foods. And then as they got a little bit older, it was the vomiting and abdominal pain in that school age. And then as the stricturing gets worse, it's more of dysphagia and food impaction. And it's, you know, looking here at this table with the common symptoms, we see here so many of these, even without having the diet restrictions, so many of these symptoms can impact and affect the ability to meet these nutrition goals.
Do you want cold dog? Oh, sorry.
It's okay. And so what are some of the diet options when it comes to therapy for EOE? So first I want to talk about the elemental diet. This is when you remove all of the dietary antigens or foods that may cause a trigger and replace them with a hypoallergenic amino acid based formula, or some call it an elemental formula. So how effective is this in treatment? So it actually is very effective for achieving remission. In fact, a 2020 study that looked at 6 observational studies found that only 6.4% failed to achieve histologic remission. And what that means is they had less than 15 eosinophils per high-powered field. So very, very effective. The challenge is that there's a lot of factors that go into this, right? It can interfere with their oral motor development, because if they're only drinking a formula, they're not using those other skills to try and develop their eating skills. It can cause social challenges, especially if you're the only one that's drinking and everybody else, or receiving it through a tube and everybody else is eating. The cost, this is definitely huge. If it's 100% of your nutrition needs and your formula is not being covered, it's crazy how much these formulas can cost. The repeat endoscopies that are needed for gradual food introduction, the possible need for a feeding tube, and it can affect quality of life. So as we know, this is a great option, right? Because it's effective. We also need to consider the age and the preference for alternative medical and dietary management with elemental diet. So this is a great option, but we want to make sure for certain age groups that we've really gone through all of the other actions first before going to this. However, if it's an infant who's diagnosed, whose sole source is already a formula, then that's an easy one, right? Because that is an easy way to manage that and have them into achieving remission very quickly. So that is something that I think, this is a great option, but we have to consider all things, right? Then we have the empiric elimination diet. And so empiric is kind of experimental, right? An educated guess. It just means we're guessing that because these are the top 6 food allergens, that these are going to be probably pretty effective if we remove them, it's going to be effective in helping with EOE. And so how effective is this? Well, this same study that looked at the 6 observational studies found that 68% actually achieved histologic remission, and 57% on the 4-food. Well, they saw, oh, okay, well, on the 4-food elimination diet with not as many things removed, we saw that this is actually just as effective, right? So why would we remove these additional ones? But then you have those who are kind of at their wits' end and they're saying, hey, I've been there. I just want to get this better. I just want to get my child better. I'm going to remove as many as I can. So I think that step up, step down approach is really where that comes in, really where the child is at in their life. So luckily, because I was lucky enough to work in a GI clinic and work with EOE already, and know what the guidelines are, I had a lot of support around me. So he didn't know what any of the other foods were like. He didn't know what cheese pizza tasted like. He didn't know, all of the macaroni and cheese. And so for me, it was an easy decision to say, well, I'm just going to remove all these, right? However, when your child is older and used to eating these things, this is a big challenge, right? So this is a huge thing. So I think it's really dependent on where they are and what's giving them the best, quality. So again, the challenges, like we talked about, is these nutritional risks, the time it takes to make these special meals, the financial burden of these higher cost foods and specialty food items and specialty grocery stores, and really, going out there and trying to figure out how to fill these gaps and change, things over from, well, okay, if they can't have this, then what can they have? And then again, the repeat endoscopies every time that you trial a new food. And then there's that psychological impact as well, and the risk of developing an eating disorder with removal of foods. So when we look here at these, the major food allergens in the 6-food elimination diet, we see here really in all of them, there's a common theme, right? And it's protein. So all of these food groups, regardless of what we're removing in the 6-food elimination diet, except for wheat, protein is a major nutrient of that food group. And so when we're asked to eliminate this, it's really hard to achieve protein goals. And we know that even if your child is allowed to have fish and shrimp and crab, all of these things, that doesn't mean they're going to eat it, right? So when you're saying, well, they can have this or they can have that, that doesn't mean they're going to eat it. I mean, I have a daughter who doesn't have any food allergies, and her main source of protein intake is dairy. And if somebody told me to take away dairy, that's a really big challenge in trying to get her protein needs in. And I'm sure it's like that for so many kids because they're already having these underlying feeding issues, right? Or if every time you drink a glass of milk, you vomited, right? You're going to have some sort of association with that or some kind of psychological impact. So the other thing we also look at is what is the most causative food in EOE? And you'll see here in all of them, it's milk. So all but this one adult study showed that milk was the #1 causative food in EOE in this 2019 article. So because of that, let's look at what, and a little bit later, we'll look at what the impact of taking milk out of the diet is for a lot of these children. And so one of the big nutritional considerations to have with these elimination diet is to have a pre-diagnosis diet review with a registered dietitian. And Stephanie, I don't know if this is an option for you, but having that dietitian support I know can be really helpful, especially when you're having a doctor that's not really understanding where you're coming at, and recommending formulas that aren't really a financial option for you. It is really working with a dietitian to see what nutritional options are for your child. They can also determine the degree of exposure to these higher risk foods, and it could have a potential impact with elimination and nutritionally, and also with quality of life. And we also know that dietary inadequacy risk increase with not only the higher amounts of foods that we're removing, but also the types of foods. And that's what we just talked about, right? So if milk was one of your main triggers and that's out of your diet, then, and that was one of your main foods that you were eating, that's just as impactful as a 6-food elimination diet in some kids, right? Because if that's a majority of what they're taking, that's still very impactful on their nutritional intake. How often these restricted foods were previously consumed, the nutritional status at diagnosis. So if already at diagnosis, there was underlying feeding issues and it took a long time to get to a diagnosis, then that can impact, their overall risk, even with these elimination diets. And then feeding difficulties, texture aversion, and then those IgE mediated allergies that cause even more elimination from the diet. A close review of the remaining calories, protein, and micronutrients, and that's something we're going to look at today. A careful review of product ingredients to ensure safety and compliance, and that's one thing. You could be spending 12 weeks thinking you've removed dairy from the diet, but if nobody's actually educated you on what that even means, and you're paying for another endoscopy and not ever had it removed from the diet because you weren't given the right tools to do this. Sometimes I think doctors think it's kind of like, oh, this is what I talk about all day, so they must know what I'm talking about when I just give them this list of foods to remove. I can't tell you how many times that I got, when I was a dietitian, that I got called like, hey, are eggs dairy? Are, or can they have lactose-free milk? These are things I know because I'm a dietitian, but if I can't tell, I had to educate my whole family, and they still are like, they make me read every single label when my kids go with the grandparents. And so I completely understand that, that can be really frustrating. And then again, identification and reassessment of feeding difficulties throughout the treatment. So we know that it's not really recommended to do therapy until, feeding therapy until they're in remission, because they're not really able to make that progress until they're feeling better, right? And then the potential risk for eating disorders. Now, this is really more studied with IgE allergies, but there also is that risk as well, according to this article. So because milk is the number one, let's talk a little bit about that. So the reason it is recommended by the USDA, and I put here the guidelines of mostly it's about 3 cups, 2 to 2.5 in the toddlers. But the reason is because it is a complete food. It is considered a complete food from macro and micronutrients, and these are essential to growth and development. It's a high biological value protein. So what that means is it includes all of these essential amino acids. And what amino acids are these basic building blocks of protein. And what happens is our body can make certain amino acids on its own. However, there are certain amino acids that are required to come from the diet, and these are our essential amino acids. And so milk is one of those that contains all essential amino acids. In addition to that, it's got a high digestibility. What that means is that when we consume it, we're utilizing all that that protein has to offer, versus some proteins have that lower digestibility. So even though that number may say a really high number, that doesn't mean that we're getting all of that. So I like to say you get the most bang for your buck with a highly digestible protein. So how do these plant-based milk alternatives match up? So unfortunately, except for soy and pea protein, they are all really, really low in protein. And so they're not great alternatives from a protein standpoint. We also see that they're high in sugar. So specifically, I would recommend using those unsweetened options, because a lot of times, even those original milks, they can add the sugar to it, but it doesn't say that. So I like the unsweetened options for that as well. And then they're also low in fat. So sometimes we don't really think about fat as much, but that is one of those key macronutrients. And if we're not getting enough from that, then that's affecting the nutritional quality of the diet. So it is actually this paper looking at, this is a newer paper in 2023, said total replacement of cow's milk by plant-based milk alternatives in infants and children, the lack of some nutrients such as minerals and vitamins, resulting in a range of developmental diseases that may pose a threat to infant and children's health. So this is a brand new study this year saying these aren't a good substitute, and you need the support to try and fill in what is lacking, because the USDA guidelines are recommending milk, and if we're taking it out, these aren't a great fill-in for that. This 2017 study looking at plant-based milk, and actually it looked at it over 30 years. So some of these milks have probably improved since the last time that some of these milks were made. But greater than 30 cases of infant and early childhood nutrition were found in these studies. They showed slow growth in length and height, poor weight gain, obvious protein calorie malnutrition, and specific micronutrient concerns such as vitamin A deficiency, low vitamin D, low vitamin C, and iron deficiency anemia. So both of these really kind of reiterate the fact that these are not an exact replacement for cow's milk. And NASPGHAN, which is and making recommendations, also says really the same things that we just said. So when it's used as your primary milk source in older children, the diet should also include alternative dietary sources of protein, calcium, iron, and vitamins B12 and D. Also consult with a registered dietitian to make sure we're filling these gaps. And when cow's milk is contraindicated, hypoallergenic formula is preferable. So I want to introduce you to our company, Ajinomoto Cambrooke, and our 2 hypoallergenic junior amino acid based formulas. And so our company was actually founded by parents and they're of children with chronic medical condition called PKU, and their names were Cameron and Brooke. Hence, that's where our company came from, is we were founded by a family, and really their children had to have a low protein diet and were taking formula, and there just weren't any available options for them. And actually the parents started baking low protein foods in their kitchen, and that's where our company was born. And really that advanced into formulas. And now, because we were acquired by a larger company called Ajinomoto, who are the worldwide leaders in amino acid production, that is really why we branched out into the amino acid formula. And in 2022, we really worked around the clock to ensure that we could provide formula to those in needs. And that's probably when a lot more people started to learn about us, because everybody was coming in on weekends, at nights, just round the clock, trying to make sure that these children were being fed, because we were started by a company. We do think it's very important to make sure that children are receiving the best nutrition that they can get. And so that is something that I really love about our company, because we do have that smaller feel, and we really went out there and we care about how that our patients have nutrition. And in case you are not familiar with an amino acid based formula, what amino acids are these basic building blocks of a protein. So when you have a whole protein formula, usually that's going to be something like a Pediasure or a Boost. And then they can kind of break it down, and that's called a hydrolyzed formula or a peptide-based formula. And those still can potentially have an allergic reaction. And that's why it's recommended specifically in EOE to have an amino acid-based formula, because amino acids are safe for food allergies. The body will not have an allergic reaction to that amino acid protein source. In addition to that, they're used in a lot of gastrointestinal diseases because the body doesn't have to work to break them down. And that is one of the main reasons why amino acid formula is the only one that's recommended in the treatment of EOE. So we have both EquiCare Junior and Essential Care Junior. One of these pouches, so these pouches are similar to a can of powder, but they're in a pouch. And I can tell you from somebody who used cans and then now uses pouches, this is such a better thing, because you can stack them and pack them and travel with them. They do seal back up, and they have a scoop inside, just like with your other formulas. But if you were to make an entire pouch of that, that's 66 ounces or 1976 calories for the Essential Care and 1940 calories for the EquiCare. So you're getting a lot out of one of these pouches. It is also a complete source of nutrition. So that means it's meeting hydrate and fat needs. And it's on the label, it does contain the standard mixing. So for a normal 1 calorie per ml or 30 calorie per ounce, however you're used to seeing it. So EquiCare was actually designed to be a more affordable option. We do know that when choosing a treatment option, 37% of parents of children with food allergy reported cost is very important. And that's one of the reasons why we developed EquiCare. So EquiCare Junior actually was designed from a taste standpoint to taste just like your other amino acid formulas. It has corn syrup solids, it has artificial sweeteners, it has everything that you're used to seeing, but it's $29.99 for 400 gram pouch versus a $46.99 for a can. So this is going to be for those that really are struggling to afford their formula out of pocket, aren't able to get insurance coverage. And so it was really designed nutritionally to be similar to other amino acid formulas. Taste, tolerance, everything, but at a lower cost.
Kelly, we have a couple of questions if
Yeah,
I can.
Sure.
So Stephanie is asking, are there any practices we can do to help prevent eating disorders? And Sarah would like emphasis on this question, encouraging acceptance or trying of different foods during elimination diets, especially for the young kids.
Yeah, I think it's, instead of putting that negative connotation around food, is that with the eating disorder is that when they're eating certain foods, it doesn't make them feel good. And so they think, I might as well not eat at all, right? Like that just makes me feel terrible anyway. And I think it's that overcome that putting the positive light of, when I eat this food, I feel good. I feel good. I feel better. I have energy. When all these vitamins and minerals are restored, you're able to function so much better. So I think it's really looking at all the foods that they can have and really highlighting those foods. Not saying, oh, even in front of them. And I find myself catching myself do this all the time, is saying, oh, he can't have that. He has food allergies. Oh, he can't have that. Instead, I should be saying, oh, we actually brought these. He really likes that. Because they're free from the foods that bother him, versus, oh, he can't have that, he's got food allergies, and having that negative connotation around food, and instead putting that positive light around it as like, this is going to nourish your body, this is going to make you feel better, and not having that negative light on the food. And same with formula as well. Anything else, Shay, before I move on?
Nope, that's it.
Okay.
Dorothy.
Well, I think part
oh,
of the
go ahead.
second question, how I'm interpreting it anyways, I could be wrong, but like if kids are on a restricted diet and they're allowed, like you said, they might be allowed to eat these foods, but they won't even try them. Is there a way that you know of to encourage kids to try different foods because of their restricted diet, to allow them to have more expanded diets?
More variety. I
Mhm.
think it's creating foods that they're familiar with and comfortable with, but in a way that they, it's adjusting recipes. So say like, brownies was a big thing, right? So like making those comfortable foods safe foods for them. And so once they start and adding those into their diet, or on their plate, just as a little part of it, right? So you're not going to give them a plate of brownies for dinner, but putting that safe food on there so that they feel more willing to try the other things, like, oh, this was good, I know this is good. And then they're more willing to accept some of the other new foods.
And we do have one more. April says, great point, Kelly. Another tip is to work with a feeding therapist. I know this is a question talked about often, and or mental health therapist. As Kelly said, the feeding issues are often related to medical conditions, so they may need hands-on support. Resolving symptoms before we push adapting eating behaviors is also important. But
So then if the kid's afraid to eat it, so would that be where the feeding therapist would be better?
Yes, for sure. And there's definitely feeding therapists out there and that have studied the behavioral aspect of this. And I think that's so important. I know some people are lucky enough to have them at their medical centers. But really even just asking your medical team if they have any people that they can refer for these specific conditions.
Okay, because I know that is one of our other struggles, is she's a lot of times afraid to try new things. They're also afraid of the medicine.
Yeah. And I can tell you, we had a case study in one of our patients who, she was afraid to try anything from a can. So even the sound of the can opening, she was not willing to try that formula because it came from a can, and everything that she's tried that came from a can, she wasn't willing to try. But when she switched over to essential care, it was at a pouch. And so it's those little things of like these behaviors of like, this, every time I eat this, this is what happens, or every time I drink this, it tastes like this. And trying it in different forms. I think feeding therapists are really good at really showing you ways to help put that positive light on food and try new things. So we really, for essential care, we really looked and said, we went to clinicians, we went to parents, and we said, what are your patients saying they're wanting in a formula? And we said to parents, what are you looking for? What don't you like with your current amino acid formulas? And one of the bigger things that we heard is, we don't like corn syrup solids, we don't like corn, and we don't like artificial sweeteners. So one of the big things that we did with Essential Care Junior is we created a formula that was more natural, more closer to food, using natural ingredients. So we don't have artificial ingredients. We don't have corn ingredients. We don't have soy ingredients. So even though they don't contain these proteins, we still want good ingredients, right? It's not all about just the protein, right? We're looking at all of these other nutrients in our formula, and we want another option. And so that's really where Essential Care was born. And just because I know we're getting short on time, just to kind of give you some of the highlights of Essential Care is that we've really improved the carbohydrate profile. We know that some of the issues with tolerance may not even be related to allergy, right? Sometimes we have these underlying inflammatory processes that are keeping us from tolerating this well. And so we actually have a nice carbohydrate blend in Essential Care that really helps to promote tolerance. It's free of corn, it's free of soy, and it's free of artificial ingredients. There's lower amounts of those simple sugars, those simple carbohydrates, and we've actually added in a complex carbohydrate that helps digest and helps with formula tolerance. It's got the highest protein per calorie, and it has a unique amino acid blend. So not just looking at the amount of protein, but the type. We have DHA, we have lutein for brain and eye development, and then higher amounts of those healthy fats that help fight inflammation. One of the main things I like, and I know Ellen said it briefly at the beginning, was we really focus on the taste profile. So we actually know that these amino acid formulas can be bitter because actually learned and studied from our parent group, Ajinomoto, looked at the taste profiles of these individual amino acids and found that some are bitter, some are sweet, some are savory. So we really adjusted that ratio so we don't have to mask the formula with artificial sweeteners. And that's what a lot of times these formula companies will do, is they'll just add artificial sweeteners and mask that bitterness. Whereas what we've done is we actually use a natural monk fruit to sweeten it, and then we don't have to use any of those artificial sweeteners to do it. So it's actually smells better, tastes better, because you can have the greatest formula in the world, but if they're not going to drink it, then it's really hard to get them to like something, right? But something I didn't really realize before is that corn syrup solids, yeah, they're the first ingredient, but if you look at the percent of total ingredients, they make up more than 50% of the can of ingredients by weight. And so we think, oh, no wonder a lot of these kids aren't tolerating it. What they have is this large amount of simple sugars. In addition to that, they can ferment quickly and then cause gas and bloating. And so we actually we focus on not only the type of carbohydrate, we use tapioca. We focused on the amount, so we have a lower percent of calories from carbohydrate, and then we have a reduced amount of simple carbohydrate. So we have tapioca syrup solids, and we have tapioca starch, so that you have that simple and that complex carbohydrate to help with digestion. And then we have a higher protein. We looked at the protein quality because we saw how important not just the protein is, but the actual quality of the protein is. So we have more essential amino acids because we know how important those are. We have more of this really great nutrient that helps build muscle called leucine. And overall, we just try to focus on these main, these main points to help give you guys some choices, right? Because when you only have one or two choices for, then they're all the same. people needed something different, right? So really looking at what this looks like as far as how bad, and this was an eye opener. So I took my son's current diet, and I'm embarrassed, right? He was deficient in not only his calories were about 50% of what they should be. This is without formula. So even though he's taking formula, I only put on here what he was consuming the day before without formula. Protein, carbs, fat. He was deficient in everything. Iron, calcium, folate, potassium, all of these nutrients. So he had Skinny Pop popcorn, steamed rice, Welch's fruit snacks, banana, gluten-free pasta with some earth balanced butter. And I thought to myself, wow, I really do give myself, like, I kind of am like, okay, well, he's got essential care. He'll be okay. And it's true, like looking at this was really big because it showed me, wow, these are all deficient. So if you look here, this is his diet without the formula as well. These vitamins, the B vitamins, are so important for cellular energy, for the nervous system, and he was deficient in all of these without any formula. And then his bone health, I mean, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. And then lastly, iron. So iron is what, helps us carry oxygen throughout the body and helps our blood health. And so deficient without all of these. So really with the Essential Care Junior, 21 ounces per day, we were able to meet all of those: energy, protein, fat, and calcium. All of this really turned around with the Essential Care Junior added. And then looking at the protein quality. So I substituted it with almond milk and said, okay, well, what if he were to take 21 ounces of almond milk, unsweetened vanilla? And again, not even close to meeting his amino acid needs. And this is protein quality. And then now with the Essential Care Junior, it's well above what he needs for all of his essential amino acids. So then I looked at, okay, what is diet alone plus diet with almond milk, diet with Essential Care Junior, and diet with EquiCare Junior. And you can see here, the diet alone and the diet with almond milk was not even close, right? So, it really just shows. Go ahead. Hello? Did somebody have something? Okay. It really just shows here, like how difficult it can be. Really looking at these vitamins, fat, protein, vitamin K, thiamine, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, iron, and zinc. These are all so important for our immune system. No wonder when they're having these diets, they feel terrible. They don't feel like eating. Like, even when you're eliminating them, you're still not going to feel great if you're not able to fill a lot of these nutritional gaps. And so really, that was an eye opener for me, even because I was like, I didn't even realize how bad it was. And I'm a dietitian trying, I'm trying to do it. I know I have the background, but it was kind of embarrassing to say, oh goodness, I told my husband, I'm like, this is not good. So, I kind of just wanted to throw this on here too. If you're, here today or listening to the recorded version, you can get samples of these on our website. When you order a sample, it will come in these little 1-serving sachets so that you can taste the formula and see if, instead of buying a whole pouch, seeing how it tastes. We have these little sachets that you can make up to see if your child will accept it. Or if once you find out which one they like, you can purchase with a 25% off code, and it's Cured 25. And like I said, you go straight to our website and that's where you will find it. But we also have a really great part of our company called Cambrooke Care, and they really work with your insurance companies to try and get formula coverage. I know they've been successful, and so many people that thought they could never get coverage. It's also, we're available in a variety of DMEs, so in WICs across the United States, and you can ask your provider, you know, just to kind of help. You can resend the prescription. Catherine is Catherine Idle here. She's one of our sales reps for GI and allergy, and she is on the call today, and she has provided her email so that if you have a DME that you work with and you want to know if they'll provide the formula, she can reach out to them. So just reach out to her as well. And then for Cambrooke Care, the steps are really, there's a form online that we can give you, but honestly, Catherine can help you with all of this. You just need a prescription. It is helpful to have, if you do have a clinician note, and they can fill out our letter of medical necessity to help kind of promote the reason and the push towards getting formula coverage.
Kelly, Sarah
Yes.
had a question up above a
Sure.
little bit that said, my son certainly increased much needed weight, etc. on formula, but can it really cover all nutrients required? Example, some vitamins less uptake when given with other vitamins.
Okay, so you mean, can it fill 100% of the nutrient gaps? Is that kind of what you were saying? With diet alone or as sole source? Sorry.
She didn't specify.
Oh,
sole
sole source. Yes. So they are, it
Okay.
is a complete source of nutrition. So it will cover 100% of nutrition needs at a specific volume that's recommended by your clinician, so your healthcare provider. So that they'll be the ones to determine the volume that you need to be able to meet those needs. But yes, it is a complete source of nutrition. So it is exactly replaceable for 100% of the diet. I was just showing an example of it as a supplemental source to a clearly very poor diet, one that I thought I was doing okay with. We also have some great resources as well. We have mixing guides that really go through different concentrations. If your child doesn't really like to take a lot of volume, or if you want a little bit less, because like I think you were saying earlier, Stephanie, that your daughter, it's too thick for her. So we have those lower concentration mixing, and you can gradually increase that concentration as they get used to the thickness of it. So we have some recipes for the lower concentration as well, because yeah, milks typically are 20 calorie per ounce, which is like an infant formula mixture. And these are about 30 calorie per ounce. So we have those to kind of gradually work them up to that higher concentration. We have recipe books that have sweet and savory allergy-friendly recipes using our formulas. We have transition guides and parent guides that help kind of guide you and with transitioning from either another formula, breast milk, over to amino acid formula. And then you have April Clark and myself. April is our allergy specialist, clinical specialist. I worked in GI, and so April has over 10 years of experience in working with food allergy and specifically in EOE clinics. So she is a wealth of knowledge, and we're both here to support you guys in anything that you need related to this.
Kelly, Donna Marie is asking, do you mix these with water? They are just starting a dairy-free diet for their 16-year-old, and she has low iron and vitamin D issues. She can't swallow pills, so she needs a supplement that is liquid, looking for a supplement to help add nutrients.
Yes, so absolutely. Yes, it is water. You will add a certain amount of water. So it's about 8 ounces. And then depending on what the formula, they have different recipes. So but for example, you start with 8 ounces of water, you add your 6 scoops, and then you close the container, shake it up, and it'll be like a milk type beverage. So for our essential care, we have vanilla, white chocolate, citrus, and unflavored. I often recommend if you don't like the sweeter taste, you can always mix and match, right? So you can add a little bit of unflavored, like if it's 4 scoops, you can do 2 scoops of unflavored and 2 scoops of vanilla, or 2 scoops of citrus and 2 scoops of vanilla is a really good, like a creamsicle type taste. So there's a lot of ways to kind of mix it up, especially if this is a big part of your diet and you want to make sure that you don't get sick of it. So we do have some good flavor options there as well. And I also want to mention, we do have this early experience program where we are looking to kind of get feedback and data. The really the benefit to you, and why I'm mentioning it here today, is if you participate in this program, you will get you'll get free formula until the duration of the data collection is complete. Or if you're waiting insurance coverage, or you're working with our Cambrooke Care program, you'll get the formula until that you get that insurance coverage. Really, all that's needed is we have a HIPAA form just to allow your healthcare provider to share your information. And then at the end of it, there's an online survey that you would complete. And then again, you'd need approval by your prescribing clinician. So they require an initial assessment and then a follow-up to collect that data. But really, we've seen some great reports. I put kind of on here what we've had feedback. What we did was for the formula shortage, we had some dietitians collect some retrospective data. So looking back at it, of patients that had changed from their original amino acid formula to our EquiCare Junior. And we just had such great feedback. They were grateful for the cost savings. 100% of their needs were via GJ tube, and they were still having to pay for it out of pocket. They were happy with the availability, and all of these continue on this formula after switching. They appreciated the pouch packaging because it was easy to throw away after. You can the good thing about it is you can kind of like scoop it out. I was actually just doing that tonight, and I was like, wow, I really appreciate that I can get all the formula out of it. So it's nice to have that as well.
Kelly,
Yes.
there's a question. Have you noticed any dental or gum issues? This is a really great question. Personally, I have the same question from both vomiting early on and then maybe mostly formula fed. So less food passing through the mouth, if any.
Yes. So not necessarily from the formula, but I would say the acid in the beginning. So what we were told by our dentist, because my son had a cavity very early on, was that because of his EOE, had like a lot of that acid and he had cavities in the back. So I think a lot of it is from like the vomiting early on, the acid reflux that is was affecting the enamel, from like our older children and adults that are on formula. We have not heard that as an issue, but that may be something I'm just not aware of. So I don't want to speak for everyone. April had chimed in. April said this can also be related to missing nutrients that support bone health when not replaced as well. So good point. Yeah.
Kelly, I hate to look to make sure your state is covered for formula. You could always find that information on the Cured website under the formula coverage. And we're just adding the link. We'll add the link to Cambrooke. think it was just a it was a wealth of information. Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and all about your product. I think everyone could agree that, you know, it was a lot of helpful information. And we'll also put the link up on our Facebook page. So if anyone didn't register and won't watch the video, I think we could post the video there also, so that the whole community. It's great talk and all about your product.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here today. Thank you, Curd. This was a really great opportunity, and I really loved getting to hear your stories as well.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Ellen. I was gonna ask Kelly, you had said something about dietitian. Is there any way we can keep up with you to be able to, if we have questions or anything like that? Because most of the
Sure.
dietitians I have talked to said they do not want to work with her unless she is symptom free.
Sure. So you can, my email is right here. Do you see it, kmiller@cambrooke.com?
I'm sure I've seen it somewhere.
Oh, no, it's right here. Can you still see the slides?
Oh, yep, yep. got
Okay,
it.
yeah, so it's right here. That was going to be my ending. Yeah. So if you have any
Okay.
questions that you have for me that you didn't get a chance to ask, please feel free to email me. I did not put my phone number on here, but it is in my email, and I can always, if you want to share yours, I can always call you.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
of course. All right, thank
Thanks.
you all.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
Thanks for
night.
being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.